Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. Hope you're having a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint here, and I wanted to talk to you guys about a recent experience and a recent achievement I did on my account, and it was hitting Gold 1 on Tag Team Arena. And I noticed that there was a lot of players that were having interesting or similar experiences as I, where like you're battling and you're catching yourself neck to neck with like a lot of champions that may seem insurmountable, and a lot of it's going to come down to what you have and what you've been building into them, right? And I understand that a lot of people have like certain characters that are restricted to certain content, and I believe me, I've been there, I am there, you know, we all go through it, right? But I do want to talk about a particular type of champion for PvP related content, and maybe even a little bit for PvE depending on the champion type, that has given me a way to find my solution. And believe it or not, it was one champion difference that kind of got me over the finish line, because I've been, for the last couple of resets now, I've been trying to get through gold, and get to gold 1 and higher, and I just couldn't do it. I don't know what it was. Like, I just felt like I was overwhelmed. I didn't feel like I had anything that was like, you know, worth defending against, and we're gonna break it down a little bit, and I'm actually gonna show you guys a little bit of what I used before in the past. So with that being said, what type of champion helped me out the most? Well, believe it or not, there's going to be, and I'm just going to drive a conversation that, like, as you're progressing in this game, and this is like my little disclaimer now, as you progress in the game, there is going to be a point in time where you're going to need to have certain types of champions to be able to do things more effectively, right? Because you're now competing against other accounts who are also pushing for the same likeliness, right? So, with that being said, if you don't have access to all these different types of champions, you may have some variations, some alternatives. It's always worth to keep in mind. But this is one of many different ways that you're going to approach it, so don't shoot the messenger. I'm just here to try to help as much as I can, okay? Now, I'm going to show you guys something from a defensive standpoint, and then we'll talk offense and why these particular types of champions benefited me so tremendously, okay? And I actually have a screenshot here that I wanted to show you guys to give you guys a little bit of a idea as to what I was doing and how I incorporated my teams to maybe give myself a little bit more of a competitive edge. And in particular, there's two champions I want to point out. One of them should be acquiesceable for everyone until, I guess, the end of this month, which is October, is Sun Wukong. And then, of course, my most recent acquisition from the Prison Crystal event, Solistic Chaos, and some of the other boys that helped me get along the way, like Jugs and Crafty, to name a few. But there's other people in the community that helped me. Thank you all, okay? It was Uko. I got Uko in my Prison Crystals, and believe it or not, these two types of champions do practically the same thing in a different way, and allow me to elaborate. One thing that you're going to go against, depending on the type of team you deal with, is going to be pretty much a lot of buffs, right? And those buffs are there to either enhance their efficiency at doing something to you, or to prevent you from being able to do what you're efficient at against them. So say, for instance, you're dealing with damage dealers. Having something like Strengthen makes their damage output lower so that you're tankier and you're surviving from it, right? Whereas like increased attack can enable them to be a little bit more effective at their damage, right? So like understanding buffs and how they apply in these types of fights are important. But when you're talking about buffs in general, having champions who can do something around the lines of what like Mighty Uko does with their A2, or Sun Wukong with his A3 is very, very important. We're gonna talk about it a little bit. So his A2, for example, does attack 2 enemies, and it has a 75% chance, when booked it's a 100% chance, to remove 2 random buffs from the target. Being able to strip people from like things that make them effective, whether that's, you know, shields, strengthen, increased defense, if we're talking about survivability, increased attack, if you're trying to do it from a defensive standpoint, it's very versatile in that mindset and that aspect, right? Basically just removing, and a lot of times, a lot of champions, if you're familiar with the way this game operates, a lot of champions, most of the time, they do one turn is just completely dedicated for them providing buffs. I'll give you an example. One of the strongest champions of the game, and still to this day pretty meta, is Duchess. However, whenever you're using Duchess, one turn of hers is literally all about buffing your team. So imagine taking a champion or a set of champions, like for example, we'll use another one that may be somewhat meta, Kanjafan, who may also buff himself in the same turn, or a turn that's very close to the same likeness of like Duchess. And then you have someone like Uko who goes in and automatically just strips or tears down some of those buffs that were put up. And then on top of that, if you're earlier, depending on how you're building and whatnot, you can place block buffs. So now that even if they do use their buffs, they don't have the turn, so they're losing a turn, right? Being able to provide strips or being able to do block buffs, in a sense, in this type of environment actually is very, very healthy. and allowing you to be able to get in or protect yourselves a little bit more because their output's a lot weakened is very valuable. So someone like Mighty Uko, or better yet, we can go to a more acquiesceable champion in Sun Wukong, since everybody can get him. Having enough accuracy to land the strip and maybe even the block buffs is very, very valuable, right? And I was originally of the proponent that, like, Sun Wukong's best build is his hybrid, or not his hybrid, but his strong high speed, high utility accuracy, so you can take buffs and strip and guarantee the sheep and whatnot. And that created the environment where now you have to deal with, like, resistance UDKs, which is kind of like a counter to him in a sense. And, you know, I have since then moved and tried out the damage Wukong because I was able to fully book him, and I wanted to see how much damage I can get out of him. Lo and behold, he's actually very phenomenal there too as well, right? But in my experiences, the value that I got even in my builds with Sun Wukong, I still leaned into a little bit of, like, accuracy so that I was effective enough at being able to land a little bit of those. Maybe not against all of them, but now maybe that attack type champion that they have in their team, you know, their nuker, or maybe one of their utility champions, like Helicat, for example. A lot of times they build damage into Helicats with a UDK, and, you know, you have to beat through the block damage, and you need to survive it, right? So having a little bit, they normally don't have, like, a lot of high resistance on Helicat, so you can still get the strip off of him and maybe even use him as a funnel for targeting, right? Being able to do that in general is very, very valuable, and I was able to do that and incorporate that into my team for defenses. And believe it or not, a lot of my defenses, I did change down to my lesser teams now, but before, one of the biggest values I got from a defensive standpoint in terms of helping me get further progressed in the ranking period was just winning my defenses more often. And that came from properly strategizing my teams to be more effective, to be obnoxious, to be a deterrent. No, you want to try to win, right? But not every single team is counterable or like invincible, right? Yes, you have your Mariska and your Terraces, but there are ways around that, right? Yes, you have your Kitty and Helicats, but there's ways around it, right? There's a lot of different metas out there that exist, and there's not a one-size-fits-all. There are some that are pretty close to that, but they're not 100% fail-proof, right? So the alternative to that, even if you may not have the exact answer to, like, the most impenetrable team, would be to find a way. Is like, you know what, even if you do win this, it's going to come at a cost. And a lot of times, if you pay attention to players, maybe even your own play habits, you're like, man, this fight's taking too long, let me just skip it, let me move on. I'd be more better off just investing that time to farming or just picking another fight so I can get my wins and keep it moving, right? Finding a way to make your team look formidable from the standpoint of, like, all right, not only are they hard to deal with, or you know, even if you do build them, you now have to deal with the fact that you're going to be fighting a long time with them. So using champions like Helicath and UDK that I alluded to earlier are very, very big value for me. And I as you can see it, I incorporate it with someone like Sun Wukong. So not only am I getting my damage out behind a veil of protection, but I'm also now being obnoxious. So, like, every single thing you do, I'm going to try to punish you for, right? And then there's other options where, like, I try to use other champions that recently are established or acquired, like Emic, for example, who provides control, but in a different way, right? So, like, control being an aspect that a lot of players kind of, like, don't lean towards, but, like, strip champions or champions that can do lockout, all those are very valuable. But if you pay attention, especially towards the end, I started finding ways where, like, all right, my goal is going to be to just make sure that whenever I got my my champions in play, I'm going to punish you, and I'm going to try to strip you of anything you provide. So, like, you see Uko in Team 3 or Sun Wukong in Team 1. Those champions really did a lot for me, and that was the thing that made it. As a matter of fact, I was looking at this not too early, but I was like, you know what? I could probably put Emic in this team and put Uko in this team, and then, like, that team is even more better for it because now they got a speed aura, and then, like, you know, my Emic, for example, is built a little slower, so, like, he was strong and tanky, but we got to get him to his turn, and why not with, like, a speed booster like Arbiter, for example, who's another free-to-play, right? A lot of these champions, depending on how you build them out, can be very valuable, right? Now, I did want to talk about one thing that did provide me a little bit of clarity, and this is gonna evolve as you go up. Is that, like, you can tell if you look at my particular team right now, at most I have like a 4-star rating UDK and a 4-star rating Duchess at the moment, right? That's where my current blessing level range is pretty much at peak right now. I do have a couple of champions that are excluded from, like, PvP content, like my Ralzavarg, who there was an event for, Artek, for example. They're not really designed, or in my opinion, they're not really, like, the immediate go-tos for, like, PvP meta. So I'm excluding them out of the conversation. But, like, my Duchess, for example, very versatile in PvP and PvE, right? She's at a 4-star rating. So, like, my ratings are not, like, really, really high for, like, my blessing levels. With that being said, though, if you're using your Uko or your Sun Wukong, you have to be aware of sheep. Until polymorph gets nerfed or adjusted or reworked in some capacity, that is an element that you have to kind of play with in mind, and that could make or break your team. There's been times where like I'm just eating the enemy team, and then they get a polymorph from my damage dealer, slowed me down enough to a point where they were able to, you know, revitalize themselves, and next thing you know, I'm on the back burner. I'm on the defensive now because like they had that little window of opportunity. So with that being said, when you're dealing with champions that do debuffs in some capacity, or stripping, for example, where it's like on hit procs or whatever, you do face the reality that you potentially could get polymorphs. So that is something that as you progress into the higher rankings of like PvP meta, you're going to see these champions that you're going to be going against with higher ratings, you know, in terms of blessings. You're going to see maybe 5-star, 6-star blessings, you know, people who are using wisdom with their, you know, Iron Twins resources are basically, I'm going for perfection. I'm going to max out one champion, quality over quantity, yet again, as I'm saying it. And you'll see that they're much more formidable in that sense because, yo, that one polymorph that is maxed out on Duchess, that's all it takes sometimes, and it's very, very strong, you know. So, like, I definitely want to bring that to the table as something to watch out for. Also, champions that can respond to on-hit damage, like, for example, Mortu Macabre is someone that I've been kind of testing the terrain with when it comes to my Uko. Uko's very, like, AoE heavy, so, like, if you're not stripping that stone skin, right, that a lot of Mortus like to go in with, then you're just hitting him, right? And that's giving him a chance to get that Imperil proc, which you don't want, because then you're shut out and your champions can't be revived, right? And the same is also true for someone like the Mariska duo, the Mariska Terrace duo, right? If you're hitting Mariska, Terrace is proccing his A2, which means that your battle of attrition, you're going to get cooked, especially if that Terrace can hit. You got to watch out for that kind of stuff, right? So the big thing that I would say be on the lookout for is high blessings. Be on the lookout for like champions that do responsive type measures, like Terrace is a perfect example of someone who's very strong meta, retaliatory type, you know, mechanics. And then of course on top of that too, you got to be careful with your matchups. Like another thing that I've been paying a lot of heavy observations to is like learning that you know, this matchup is good against this champion and why. So like for example, UDK against Rotos is very, very good because he can only single target attack. Same thing with Sun Wukong. Although his A3 is an AoE, outside of that, his A1 and his A2 is pretty much just single target. So you have to kind of go through that UDK that may be presenting a bit of a barrier for your enemy team, you know? And you got to watch out for that, you know? Those are like matchups, understanding matchups and whatnot. And maybe we'll do a bigger breakdown, but I just kind of wanted to talk about my thought process about why I did what I did going into it. And to be honest with you, this is gonna sound funny. I want to give a shout out to someone named Euphoria in the tag team arena. He had like now mind you, he was a little bit of a whale, but he had like double Mariska Terrace, one with Yumiko, one with UDK, and then he had like Stiffy Rotos and then a Torment, right? It wasn't a full man defense. He was pretty much the top promoter in tag team arena when I was progging this last reset. And although I sometimes would lose against that first team with the Yumiko because I would just get locked out, I would also, there's a little bit of RNG, like, you know, either I could survive the Terrace from critting my entire team, killing my Arbiter, or I was able to survive it, reestablish control, you know, knock out Terrace, knock out Mariska, knock out Terrace again, then knock out UDK, and that was good to go. But for the most part, I was able to win Team 2 and Team 3, and that was using some of the premises I had, you know, using Uko to remove debuffs from the second Terrace team so that I can knock out Mariska in one tap with my Ragash. I did do that. And, you know, using my UDK against the Rotos team and Siffy team. Believe it or not, UDK does well against both of those champions because they both only single target. You know, her irresistible sleep, you don't mind UDK getting slipped because he's slow as it is. Anyways, he's going to get hit no matter what. It's going to wake him up. And then it doesn't go to your team, even if she's trying to target them, right? He deflects with his passive. Same thing with Rotos. You know, he's a single hitter, so, like, he can't really get around that. He has to go through it. Or get somebody else to go, you know, remove that issue altogether, like Sheep from Sun Wukong while you're cleaning up the rest of the team, right? And even then, there's a challenge there, right? So, with that being said, strip champions are very, very strong. I wanted to give you guys a little bit more of like a better accessible option, and one of the ones I want to talk about is a champion I don't get a lot of, I haven't got to, and I'm wondering if, like, because we're in the Halloween spirits, we might get a chance to get this champion, and I wouldn't mind a copy of her. Would be someone like Madame Ceres, who does something very similar in a sense, right? Now, same issues arise, right? Although you're not doing any on-hit damage, and it's not going to be any proc, like, from Terrace from hitting Mariska or whatever, removing the buff and then placing debuffs still puts her in a place where she's susceptible to Sheep. So, like, something to watch out for yet again, right? But if you can strip, you've already done half the job, or the main primary responsibility of that job. Getting decreased defense and decreased attack is just an extra bonus at this point, right? You know, you're able to get a little bit more damage, or you take a little bit less damage as a result of it. Unless they have, like, cleansers and all that stuff. But, you know, semantics. At the end of it all, like, having champions that can give you strip as a whole is very, very valuable. And I'll just say for myself, I'm going to show you my Uko. I'm still going through the process of development. I'm actually slowing down on doing too many crazy builds at the moment. So you're going to see like a couple pieces that are not glyphed, for example. I'm still using some rare 5-star pieces just for concept-wise. But I incorporated Uko with a stun set and built down a pretty aggressive Fearsome Presence style approach where I'm able to get a little bit more chance landing at the stuns and whatnot. And he's not even fully booked, so I'm still not even seeing his full potential. But with having him 3-star blessing, I got temporal change, so that means I'm slowing people down whenever they do buffs. I'm also providing, you know, control in a sense where I'm stripping them, and then tether that with stun since I'm AoEing. If they don't have any block debuffs or they don't have anything that's supporting them because I stripped them, there's a chance on that second hit, on that, like, while I'm hitting them to strip them, or if I'm doing my A1 at some point, I have a chance to stun them, which gives me another element of control, right? That's really good. Even from a PvE standpoint, maybe flip this into like a provoke set. You know, Uko does really, really well in Hydra content with block buffs and decreased accuracy. You know, those are both pretty good bucks, particularly the first one. The second one might have some good play with it too, though. And, you know, you're able to control the Hydra heads a little bit better. And, like, I actually used them in a composition. I think we haven't reset yet. But Uko's actually really, really impressed upon me that, like, a champion so significant enough to a point where you were missing something in your account and it opens and explores new options for you is actually really, really fun. It's really, really exciting. And I'll just show you, for example, I decided to take out one of my more Umbral Enchantress or someone of that likeness like Deliana. You know, I sought them out and slotted in Uko, and I was still able to do top chest. I wasn't trying too hard this round. I just wanted to get my top chest and keep it moving since we are, you know, still developing a lot of teams in my clans and whatnot. But even then, being able to do effectively what I needed to do for the course of this fight, using a PvP build no less, was very, very like, okay, not bad, I'll take this. You know, it was nice, right? And they still did their job, and that's without a fully booked Uko, mind you. Like, so there were some chance failures and all that, and I was still able to get the progress I was looking for. So very, very exciting, very, very unique option. I also wanted to share with you guys my Prism experience. You know, we were trying for Rotos, we came unsuccessful, and despite that, though, we ended up coming with another set of blessings instead of, you know, like, I got like an extra G-Nut as a result of it, and then I got 2 Ukos instead of just 1, and, you know, we're one step closer to finishing off our Faction Gardens for Skinwalker. So a lot of positive experiences despite not hitting the initial goal that I was looking for, and believe it or not, the surprise I was looking for in terms of my champion, you know. Now, we talk defensive standpoint, I talk offensive at the same time too. Uko does everything that we talked about aggressively, and then you could also play a little bit more too, since you're in the control aspect of it. You can't really control what's going on behind the AI and setting it up and whatnot, right? They do what you tell it to, but you really can, like, all right, I need to interject and break the norm here for a second so I can, you know, maybe do another stun, or maybe I need to force his res here at this point in time. You don't have that control of defense, whereas on offense, I was able to use his A3 to give my team a little bit of extra speed, right, as an example, or as a clutch up for like that extra revive to give myself a little bit more sustain, and it really did help me out. I'm not gonna lie, and I think over the course of those 2 strategies where it was I'm finding and picking the targets that were easy for me, I'm bringing up a formidable defense team where a lot of people surprisingly were failing against, gave me the option to succeed, right? And like I said, I understand that not everybody's gonna have these type of champions, but the concept is there. Find champions that synergize very well together. Like, for example, UDK and Helicath, they do very, very well. And then utilize champions that can help provide like a break-in into your team, right? Like, for example, Uko and Sun Wukong, right? Those champions are champions that can inject themselves into the terrain of the fight and cause a lot of disruption and then ultimately sway it in your favor. They're not the end-all be-all. There's better options out there, and there's always going to be alternative options out there. But the concept still remains the same. Build teams that are like difficult to beat or obnoxious to fight against, or just impossible to beat if you can, and try to find those solutions. And then be aware, like, if you find, and this is one thing I would suggest to any player, if you find, like, one thing that I was doing while I was like observing my team, because I had a team before this lineup that I was using was besides Uko, because I just was working on her. I was still leveling her up. And my defenses were doing pretty good on like 2 teams, but one of the teams was kind of struggling. I was like, you know what? What if I move this piece here and then put an Uko over there? And then I started seeing I'm winning triple fights. And then, you know, eventually you'll find a team, like I've had a couple people who would attack me one time, lose, come back, attack me, and they win again. But I had to force them 2 times to fight me just to get their full-on win. And I was like, you know what? That means that my teams are starting to provide a little bit more of a sense of control, a little bit of established, like, difficulty for players to win against. And it's like, you know what? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that solution to, like, yo, I need you to hate fighting me so that you're not fighting me, so I'm still able to progress in some capacity. Or if you are fighting me, then you're hopefully losing, and then I'm gaining points as a result of that too as well. And that's what ended up, truthfully, my defense has carried me more than my offense did in Tag Team Arena. The little bit of aggressive offensive approach I was doing was just to make sure I maintain, because you do lose some, right? Like, don't get me wrong, you still lose them as you're progressing and fighting in the spam of a week, right? But like, I would definitely say that, like, you know, making up for it and making progression, and then also trying to make the defense so that your losses are minimalized and maybe even retrofitted with some victories instead. You know, that's what you're aiming for. So diversity is the name of the game, and then you want to find a way to make it work for your account. I hope this video finds you well. I'm happy to say that I'm celebrating in Gold 1. Let's go, baby. And with that all being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you have any other tips that you would like to bring to the table for other players, maybe some teams that you're like, yo, I built this team, it was actually pretty sick. Maybe I'll do a showcase on it. Who knows? We'll have to see. With that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and always remember, stay ascended.
Got the